No longer. Alimony, palimony. It's all financial. Love's an illusion.
It's the only illusion that counts, my friend.
Says who?
Anyone who's ever been in love.
Love sucks.
Every day, I share another story from the Golden Age and the moments that helped shape an unforgettable era. If you would like to keep these memories alive with me, you are welcome to subscribe. It costs nothing, yet it means a great deal. Thank you for being here. Now, we begin. In 1985, a magazine article placed him under the well-known Brat Pack label, and Andrew McCarthy later said it nearly unraveled his career. He was the dream figure of the 80s, the thoughtful one, the steady choice, the romantic presence in films like Pretty in Pink. Yet behind the scenes, life was far more complicated. He struggled with heavy drinking, found it difficult to connect with others, and lived with a constant sense of uncertainty. Then, in the early 2000s, he stepped away from Hollywood and turned towards something entirely different, something distant from the world that had defined him. Years later, he would return, but not in the way many expected. So what truly shaped Andrew McCarthy's journey? Fade to black. Andrew Thomas McCarthy was born on November 29, 1962, in Westfield, New Jersey, a quiet suburb where bold dreams were not always encouraged. His father worked in finance, and his mother was an artist, yet McCarthy has said he often felt that something essential was missing. He often describes himself as shy and uncertain, someone who never truly felt he belonged. Acting became an escape, or perhaps a doorway into life itself. He studied at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, learning from some of the same teachers who once guided performers like De Niro and Pacino. But McCarthy was never drawn to method acting or intense realism. He simply wanted to feel something, to inhabit another person's world for a brief moment. His first meaningful break arrived in 1983 with a coming-of-age drama where he starred alongside Jacqueline Bisset and a young Rob Lowe. It was not a major success, yet people noticed him. His clear blue eyes and that gentle, wistful expression made casting directors see a romantic lead. That is exactly where he found himself in 1985. He appeared in Heaven Help Us, a small drama set in a Catholic school during the 60s. Again, it was not a large hit, but it placed him in the right circles. Directors valued him, producers trusted him. He was dependable, sincere in his work, and carried a quiet presence on camera. Yet even then, McCarthy felt like an outsider, convinced that others understood the craft while he was simply trying to keep up. That sense of doubt would follow him for years. Then came 1985, the year that changed everything. Andrew McCarthy was cast in St. Elmo's Fire, Joel Schumacher's ensemble story about recent college graduates learning how to step into adulthood. The cast included Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, and Mary Winningham. Nearly every rising performer under 25. The film performed modestly, but what followed soon after shifted the atmosphere entirely, beginning in June of 1985. In June of that year, New York Magazine published David Blum's article, Hollywood's Brat Pack. It was meant to profile Emilio Estevez, yet it shifted into a sharply critical portrait. The young cast was described as shallow, privileged, and interchangeable, and Blum grouped them under the dismissive Brat Pack label. McCarthy later said the article felt overwhelmingly harsh, as if it placed a shadow over his name. Almost overnight, he was no longer simply Andrew McCarthy. He became Andrew McCarthy, member of the so-called Brat Pack. And once a label settles in, it begins to shape how people see you before you even enter the room. Even so, the work continued. In 1986, he starred opposite Molly Ringwald in Pretty in Pink, playing Blaine McDonough, the polished, well-to-do young man who falls for the artistic girl from another world. McCarthy gave the role a gentle complexity, a quiet sense of conflict, as if Blaine understood he was expected to be more thoughtful than he appeared. The film became a major success, and it firmly placed McCarthy once again as the figure audiences rooted for, the one who arrived with sincerity when it mattered. And there was something that truly set him apart from many of his peers. He had a rare universal appeal. While some actors connected strongly with either young women or young men, McCarthy reached both. Rob Lowe had a bright, polished charm that made him a teen idol, yet some viewers found him difficult to relate to. McCarthy, on the other hand, carried an easygoing, lightly self-aware presence that made people feel comfortable. He was not the most confident person in the room, and he didn't try to be, and somehow that quiet honesty made him magnetic. Women saw him as gentle and romantic, while men saw him as someone familiar, a person they could easily spend time with or call a friend. He never appeared full of himself. There was a touch of uncertainty in him, even a quiet awkwardness, and in a decade filled with bold personalities and large egos, that made him stand apart. Then came Less Than Zero in 1987, and the atmosphere around him changed. Adapted from Bret Easton Ellis's novel, it offered a somber look into the emotional unraveling of privileged Los Angeles teens who struggled with unhealthy habits and destructive choices. McCarthy played Clay, a college student returning home to find his closest friend, portrayed by Robert Downey Jr., lost in a troubling downward spiral and relying on harmful decisions to stay afloat. It became one of the most vulnerable performances McCarthy had ever delivered, and he later said it felt like the most truthful. By then, he was facing his own struggles with heavy drinking, not to the extreme of his character's world, but enough to understand the emptiness Clay carried. Some critics brushed the film aside too polished, but McCarthy understood the quiet emotional fatigue at its center. For him, it was not simply acting, it was something he recognized. Later that same year, he appeared in Mannequin, a light, romantic comedy about a young man who forms a connection with a store mannequin that magically comes to life. The film was whimsical, playful, and delightfully exaggerated, offering a moment of pure fun. A complete shift from Less Than Zero, Mannequin earned over $42 million and eventually became a cult favorite. That was the nature of Andrew McCarthy in the 80s. He seemed to be everywhere, yet somehow still carried a sense of being slightly unseen. His face appeared on posters, but even he questioned who he truly was beneath the image. By the 90s, the Brat Pack label had taken its toll. McCarthy has spoken openly about it. Hollywood seemed unsure where he fit once he moved beyond his youthful look. He was not the classic leading man, nor the familiar character actor. For years, he had been cast as the thoughtful young romantic, and when that chapter closed, many of the roles closed with it. In 1988, he reunited with Molly Ringwald for Fresh Horses, a more somber story about a college student drawn to a young woman from rural Kentucky. On paper, it seemed to promise the same energy that made Pretty in Pink a success, but audiences stayed away, critics overlooked it, and the spark that once defined their pairing had dimmed. It became clear that the earlier era had passed. He continued pursuing more serious work, including Kansas, where he played a wanderer caught up in troublesome circumstances, yet the film made little impact. The projects kept coming, though the roles grew smaller. Weekend at Bernie's in 1989 became an unexpected hit and eventually led to a sequel, but McCarthy later said he accepted it mainly for financial reasons rather than creative excitement. Even when these films gathered fans in later years, at the time they felt like a step in the wrong direction. By 1991, he appeared in Year of the Gun, a tense story set in 1970s Italy. It made only a small impression. In 1993, he appeared in The Joy Luck Club, a critically praised ensemble film. Yet by then, he had settled into supporting roles rather than carrying the story. Getting In 1994 passed quietly, and Dream Man in 1995 went straight to video. He was not failing dramatically, he simply no longer felt central to the industry, and his drinking continued to deepen. McCarthy has described this period as one of profound confusion. Through his 20s, he had been recognized almost everywhere, constantly reminded that he was someone audiences cared about. And then, almost suddenly, the attention faded. Auditions slowed, calls became rare, and when opportunities did appear, the roles felt distant from him, or perhaps he no longer recognized himself in them. He often speaks of feeling invisible, not because people forgot him, but because he no longer understood who he was beneath the surface. To ease that sense of being stuck, he began to travel. At first, it was simply a way to step away for a while, but in time, it grew into something meaningful. He started writing about the places he visited, not as a former Hollywood figure, but as a person searching quietly for the next chapter. Little by little, that writing became his anchor, and in the early 2000s, Andrew McCarthy did something almost unheard of in Hollywood. He stepped away from acting and created an entirely new path. He began writing travel essays, first as personal reflections, ways to understand where he had been and where he hoped to go. Editors soon recognized that his writing was not glossy or idealized. It was sincere, reflective, and at times quietly uncomfortable. He wrote about losing his way, about solitude, and about the distance between who you become and who you once imagined yourself to be. In 2010, he became editor-at-large for National Geographic Traveler, a role he continues to hold. He also released several books, including The Longest Way Home in 2012, a memoir about journeying across the world in search of something he could not fully define, and Just Fly Away in 2017, a young adult novel. But as McCarthy explains, travel writing was not a reinvention or an attempt to return to the spotlight. It gave him a sense of purpose he never found in acting. As an actor, he often felt he was performing not only on screen but in life, trying to match what others hoped he would be. In writing, he could simply exist. Around the same period, he also began directing, mostly for television rather than feature films. He worked on series such as Gossip Girl, Orange is the New Black, The Blacklist, Grace and Frankie, Dead to Me, and many more, contributing to dozens of episodes across numerous productions. He has said he loves directing because it is not about being visible. It is about shaping a story, working with others, and helping bring meaning to the screen. McCarthy no longer needed recognition. He simply needed to feel he was offering something of value. His personal life has also been shaped by affection and by moments of distance. He first married Carol Schneider in 1999. They had 2 children, Sam and Willow, but the marriage ended around 2005. Carol later said he struggled to be emotionally present, that he did not always know how to let people close, and that he often seemed to be avoiding closeness in the same way he had avoided other parts of his life. In 2011, he married Dolores Rice, an Irish author and activist. They have one daughter together. McCarthy says this marriage feels different, not because he became a new person, but because he finally stopped trying to be someone he was not. In his 2021 memoir, Brat, he spoke openly about his long struggle with alcohol. He was not a dramatic headline figure, no chaos, no public incidents. He simply relied on drinking every day for many years, using it as a way to quiet the belief that he was not enough. Fame in your 20s can shape your sense of identity in difficult ways. People tell you you are special, yet you may not feel that way. You are told you have everything, yet you feel a quiet emptiness. Over time, you begin to believe that others understand life better than you do, and that you are only pretending to keep up. For a time, drinking softened those feelings. Eventually, he chose to stop, not through a sudden crisis, but through a gradual understanding that he no longer wanted to continue down that path. He has also spoken openly about therapy, about learning to sit with discomfort rather than avoid it, and about how growing older has brought unexpected relief because he no longer carries the weight of other people's expectations. And perhaps that is the true story, not that he stepped away from fame, but that he stopped letting it guide him. For many years, Andrew McCarthy avoided conversations about the Brat Pack. No nostalgic interviews, no revisiting the moment when everything changed at 23. But in 2021, he released Brat, a memoir that required him to finally face it. The book is candid, self-aware, and deeply introspective, and still it seemed he had more to explore. In 2024, McCarthy went even further, directing Brats, a Hulu documentary that brought together the remaining members of that era: Demi Moore, Emilio Estevez, Ali Sheedy, Rob Lowe. They gathered to speak openly about those years. No sugarcoating, no defensiveness, just an honest conversation. McCarthy does not condemn Hollywood, but he does not idealize it either. He has said the industry in the 80s was both energizing and isolating. You were constantly reminded of your value, but only as long as people continued to want you. He has spoken about how transactional it often felt, how connections were built on usefulness, and how easily people drifted away when you were no longer at the center. Yet he also acknowledges that this long path, rising quickly, fading quietly, then discovering something entirely new, taught him that a sense of self cannot come from outside approval. It must come from a quieter place within. He remains in the industry, but now on his own terms, directing television because he enjoys the process, writing because it gives him balance, and traveling because it reminds him that the world extends far beyond Hollywood. He has made peace with the idea that many people still remember him as the young man from Pretty in Pink. That image is only one chapter, no longer the person he is now. With time, he discovered that growing older can be a gift, offering the quiet permission to stop performing, to release the weight of expectation, and simply exist as himself. And perhaps that is the true conclusion. Not fame, not renewal, not certainty. So what became of Andrew McCarthy? He did not vanish. He simply stepped away from who others thought he should be. He chose not to pretend that the 80s were the pinnacle of his life, because they were not. Instead, he became a traveler, a writer, a director, a husband, a father, a man who learned at last how to be present. He spent his 20s being told he was remarkable, his 30s wondering why he couldn't feel that way, and his 40s and 50s shaping a life that no longer depended on outside approval. The Brat Pack label once weighed heavily on him, yet in the end, it did not define him. It simply marked the beginning of a much longer, deeper journey. If Andrew McCarthy was part of your youth, or if you discovered him later through his writing or his work behind the camera, I would love to hear what stayed with you. Share the role you remember, or the moment in his story that touched you most. And if this reflection meant something to you, I invite you to like, to comment, and to subscribe for more stories. See you in the next story.